Full Metal Panic is a strange beast. The series has been through the hands of no less than 3 studios over a span of 16 years. Yet for a story that goes through a number of distinct tonal shifts, Full Metal Panic's multi-studio adaptation works surprisingly well. Gonzo's take on the first 3 novels stumbles at times through the series' shape-shifting, from comedy to action to romance and back, but provides an honest enough stab at all of them to create something truly endearing. It boasts its bold character animation and bolder fan service, and solidifies itself as something to be remembered. In its fleeting moments of genuine introspection, it shows glimmers of what the series will grow to be. A fresh-faced Kyoto Animation smoothed the transition with the fun-filled Fumofu, all pastel-toned summer evenings and bombastic slapstick comedy, before delivering The Second Raid, one of the most unsung 10 out of 10s the anime industry has ever seen. The Second Raid is a cool-toned, darkly mature character piece that allows the series' characteristic humour to finally take its place in the back seat. Its runtime is peppered with moments of silent horror, as the characters come to realise the scale of what they're grappling with and how it is changing them. It's the pause for breath before the series straps itself in for its eye-wateringly intense second half. I have a whole video on The Second Raid, so go and check that out if you haven't, and we'll meet back here in 5. Finally, Xebec pick up from where KyoAni left off so gracefully that the distinct change in art style and 15-year wait fall away immediately. Here, the series is ready to bear the full weight of the story it endeavours to tell, as we are thrust finally and completely into a world torn by war. While The Second Raid has to take the spot as my favourite season of Full Metal Panic for its sheer directorial mastery, Invisible Victory is, for me, the emotional core of the entire series, and the most enjoyable entry yet. Moreover, beyond the gunfire and bloodshed, it's easy to miss the hidden tapestry of meaning just below Invisible Victory's surface. A drama CD adapts the novel that bridges The Second Raid and Invisible Victory, Dancing Very Merry Christmas. It's more of a side story than part of the overarching narrative, but it also serves as a full stop to Sosuke and Kaname's character arcs through the first half of the series. Namely, this is the entry where they both acknowledge the nature of their feelings for one another within themselves. This means that come Invisible Victory, very little is left to obstruct their developing relationship, even if it has yet to find its way into words. Series like Full Metal Panic, where the characters act like real young people embarking on a mutual relationship, are such a breath of fresh air. The first episode of Invisible Victory opens with a regular school day. The last, in fact, that our leads will experience for some time. In the light novels, as our leads walk home hand in hand, we see Kaname wondering anxiously if it's a good idea to invite Sosuke back to her apartment. Would this be crossing a line? Something might happen. But what if she wants it to? In a medium inundated with paragons of chastity, Kaname is portrayed consistently as a young woman with sexual agency. She knows she's attractive. Sosuke describes her as both beautiful and strong. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Full Metal Panic also shows us that it is absolutely possible to portray Sosuke's attraction to Kaname without resorting to objectification. This is, in every way, a series that seeks to explore the experience of becoming an adult. After over a decade of watching the characters of this medium faint at the mention of kissing, I kind of had to pick my jaw off the floor when the light novels made completely clear that Kurtz and Mao had begun sleeping together later in the series. We see Kurtz confide in Sosuke about it, and then see him talk to Tessa. Kurtz is in his late teens, Mao is in her mid-20s, but then he'd been coming on to her, but then she's his superior officer, and what about feelings getting in the way of their job? Real conversations real people have every day, real issues with no easy answers. Before all of this, as Kaname and Sosuke enter her darkened apartment on that winter evening, there's no time to see what might happen, because a one Leonard Testarossa crashes the party. Leonard sits all too comfortably in Kaname's living room and tells her her life as she knows it is over. She will come with him, or Amalgam will take her by force and kill anyone who gets in their way. They've played nice for too long, and it's time for them to make clear to Mithril exactly how serious they are. This scene is layered with meaning, and the anime omits one key word: Job. This is Amalgam's codename for Kaname. Job was a character from the Old Testament of the Bible, a regular, hard-working man blessed with good fortune in life. Job worships God devoutly, and one day Satan approaches God to suggest Job only does this because God has been so generous towards him. God then prompts Satan to test Job in order to prove his devotion is genuine. Satan proceeds to bring calamity upon Job, going so far as to kill his children. For a time it works, and Job's faith is broken. The insinuation is clear, even more so when we see Sosuke compared directly to Jesus later in the show. Kaname only cares about Sosuke, indeed only loves him, because Sosuke has conditioned her to. No prizes then for guessing what Leonard's role is in this metaphor. His armed slave is even called Belial. If Satan is the ultimate symbol of rebellion against God, Leonard fits this comparison in ways that only become further apparent the deeper you go into the series. We already know he deals purely in lies and manipulation, but we'll come back to the Bible classes later. In this scene, Leonard asks Kaname why she doesn't join him. Isn't she better than Mithril? Than Sosuke? Her powers elevate her to a class none of her peers can ever aspire to join. When he first introduces himself, it is as one of her kind. Kaname's reaction to all of this is interesting. We see clear as day how deeply it disturbs her. It's a similar response to what we get from Sosuke in his last conversation with Gauden. These expressions of solidarity disorient Kaname and Sosuke. They're not immune to such things. Kaname is, by this point in the series, at war with her own mind. Leonard knows exactly what she's going through. A powerful, frightening disconnect from the people around her and her own idea of who she is, by virtue of her powers and the feelings they stir in her. It's only natural some part of her would feel attracted to the prospect of being near others who understand this. It's the most human of needs. While his proposition is a valid one, all of Leonard's behaviour screams textbook psychological abuse. He is trying to make Kaname feel distant from those around her, whilst giving the impression of it happening naturally, so that when the time comes, she will be isolated within her relationship with him, with nowhere else to turn. He is capitalizing on her discomfort towards this still unfamiliar world of death and destruction, at which Sosuke stands at the center. As his parting comment, Leonard casually reveals that during a personal inquiry, he discovered Sosuke had killed more than 100 people. It's not hard to work out that he's trying to drive a wedge between the pair, but it doesn't matter. The attack lands. With this simple prelude, all hell breaks loose. When Kaname refuses to come quietly, Amalgam attack, using their overwhelming power to all but destroy Mithril and scatter its forces practically overnight. This leaves Sosuke and Kaname largely isolated as they try to fight their way to safety in the series' most visceral action sequence to date. Just as the two manage to break away, Amalgam deliver a new ultimatum in the form of the news that their entire school has been rigged with bombs, and Kaname's best friend Kyoko has been taken hostage. What follows is interesting because it's perhaps the only scene that has been actively altered from the source material. By this point, Kaname has already completely lost the will to fight. She's ready to surrender. There's simply no other option. Sosuke's lines are the same in the anime and the novels. Believe in me, we can do this together. Kaname in comparison is almost vitriolic. She completely rejects him. She has lost hope. As such, rather than fruitlessly trying to convince her, Sosuke uses a stun gun to render her unconscious. He forges ahead with his plan to save Kyoko and the rest without handing Kaname over to the enemy. The chance of success? He estimates 1%. In all likelihood, Kyoko and the rest of their friends will die because of his choice. He knows and accepts this. It's a bet he's willing to take. It's a moment of huge importance for both Sosuke and the wider narrative. In the anime, Kaname is far more amenable. With a few kind words, she concedes and aids Sosuke in his plan. It's hard to believe this decision was made purely to save time. Rather, new scenes are added because of it. It's a choice that stands out in what is otherwise a very faithful adaptation. What this scene does give us is a still very much conscious Kaname, and with that, a few more moments between the two. It should be said that while Invisible Victory does tend to omit the depth of Kaname's pessimism as the series goes on, this initial scene at the shrine is far more than pure fan service. In it, Kaname has the chance to say what she's been thinking. Sosuke scares her. She scares herself. She doesn't know who she is anymore. This outburst is heartrending, and Sosuke responds in kind. He feels completely the same way, and yet, in spite of it all, he's drawn to her. There is so much that threatens to come between our leads, so much that separates them still, and so much they will never understand about one another. They come from different worlds. Even so, their love persists, not in absence of, but in the face of hardship. These first 4 episodes focus heavily on this inexplicable bond, their tangible draw to one another, so much more than simple chemistry. I couldn't tell you myself how this feeling is communicated so palpably, only that these fleeting moments of connection scattered throughout the series' opening act carry an undercurrent of melancholy deep enough to make my heart ache, as we and our leads alike wonder how much time they have left together in a world that seems determined to pull them apart. While all this is going on, Mithril is in crisis, for the first time faced with a conflict of a magnitude they're simply not sure they can handle. When one of her subordinates starts talking about simply handing Tessa over to the enemy in exchange for their lives, we get another fantastic scene. Here she makes perfectly clear that if anyone thinks she'll let this kind of comment go out of goodwill, they're sorely mistaken. Just as Speck clarifies he thinks she's a, quote, great girl, her warning shot drowns out his words. This is the scene that sets the tone for the story here on out. It says time's up. There comes a point in life where you have to be able to face up to the decisions you've made. There is nothing more pitiful than someone who complains about circumstances they've brought on themselves. Even so, when Speck does end up sacrificing himself for his team in spite of it all, it feels all the more weighty because we know there is no glory in it. Fullmetal Panic's deaths are treated with a sobering realism. What Speck's outburst really says is to remember none of them ever wanted this. Fullmetal Panic's characters are not martyrs. They're humans who want desperately to live. All this time, Leonard's words weigh on Sosuke, having snaked into his head and bound themselves to his pre-existing insecurities. When it seems as though the only option is to run away with Kaname, leaving Mithril, Amalgam and everything else and taking up new identities, it's not the impossibility of it that stops him, but the idea that he isn't worthy of such a thing. Why should she have to live out the rest of her life with him? He wonders. Is she better off without him? He sees himself as a symbol of the calamity brought upon her life, even as he tries to protect her from it. As much Satan as God. After all, Leonard wasn't lying. He is a killer. When Sosuke arrives to save Kyoko and the school, we see it spelled out. Who are you? What in the world are you? Kyoko was always very sweet, but now there was a bitter edge to her words. Yet there wasn't any spite in her tone or on her face. For someone confronted with a phenomenon and entity so foreign that they couldn't understand it, it was an honest reaction because of too much innocence. It was the cruelest response. What are you? Kyoko resolves to be more than a conveniently tragic side character. She wants to know why her best friend never entrusted her with any of what was happening. Was she not worth the trouble? Didn't she have a right to know? Those left in the wake of the destruction are never forgotten. All around them, the town Sosuke has come to call home is being destroyed, signifying an end to the peaceful life he had enjoyed. More than that, we see the idea that he could ever start afresh in Tokyo was little more than a blissful delusion. His task is to face up to his past, whilst finding a way to reconcile it with his future. Invisible Victory's title couldn't be more apt. Kaname had been right. Hope dims faster than the sun sets. While Sosuke succeeds in evacuating the school before the bombs go off, Kyoko still ends up gravely injured, and with Leonard's promise that far worse things await Sosuke, Kaname finally shows up and surrenders herself to the enemy. Sosuke spends much of the rest of the series chasing Amalgam and Kaname across the world, acting as a one-man force after a crushing defeat leaves Mithril on its knees. Fullmetal Panic's myriad settings and wonderfully lived-in environments contribute greatly to the feeling that this story exists within a fully realised world, something that will only become more meaningful as the series progresses. While I'm not going to go in depth on the arc here, I would be remiss not to mention that we watch a teenage girl die purely because Sosuke essentially uses her as a stepping stone to get to Kaname. Fullmetal Panic doesn't try to justify this to us. Sosuke is not a hero. His actions are never portrayed in an objectively positive light. As Nami's bullet-riddled body collapses, the cross falls from her neck. Karuma discarding the countdown to shoot Nami before Sosuke gets to decide what he wants to do is simply the most painfully direct way of illustrating the senselessness of war. Reason and fairness do not exist on the battlefield, something that in his time in Namsak, Sosuke had almost forgotten. Shortly before this happens, Sosuke describes himself for the first time not as a mercenary, but simply a man. The preservation of life is no longer his driving force. Rather, he is acting out of a want to save the woman he loves, no matter the cost. One of the later battles in the series takes place in the church where Sosuke is hiding out. There's yet more focus on religious imagery, with Sosuke visually juxtaposed with a crucifix. In one of my absolute favourite scenes in a series that really doesn't make that an easy accolade to hand over, he uses all the strength in his emaciated body to reach upwards, intercut with a shot of Christ's palm nailed to the cross, only to collapse amidst the all-consuming sound of ever-nearing gunfire. Later, Tessa will liken Sosuke to a messiah. Perhaps it is his role to save them, the Whispered. He wonders to himself how the man who failed to protect Kaname from Amalgam and left Nami to die could ever deserve such a title. To me, the scenes of destruction here tell us not to idolize him. To see Sosuke as Kaname's knight in shining armor, to admire that, is to miss the point entirely. There's a reason she shoots this idea down in the very first arc of the series. He's doing this for himself. The power of Fullmetal Panic is the way it portrays our right to selfishness. This only becomes more poignant when saving Kaname means sacrificing so many others along the way. By any moral measure, it is the wrong choice. It isn't just leaving the trolley to kill the 5, it's actively changing the path for your own gain. It's the greatest sin. Deciding one life outweighs another. It's the kind of love story we often see romanticised, finally forced under the spotlight, where the trail of blood it leaves in its wake is apparent for all to see. In everyday life, love doesn't carry these kinds of stakes, but it makes us wonder, if it did, if we were Sosuke, how far would we be willing to go for that which is most precious to us? So we know Amalgam's codename for Kaname is Job. What's Mithril's? Angel. When we hear this at the start of the series, it's portrayed simply as an irony. Her almost ethereal beauty falls away the second she opens her mouth. And yet, angels act as intermediaries between the heavens and earth. The ending sequence to Invisible Victory is likewise set in a church. We see Kaname in the fetal position, the emblem of innocence she represents, the right to a good, untarnished life. From the light novels, her true essence was to fight against war and death, like a symbol of calmness and kindness. Here she is wearing the modest, pure white dress she does when in captivity given to her by Leonard, not unlike a wedding dress. In the final scene, she reaches upwards, but the sky is far. We see a white feather drift down. In comparison, the opening sequence to Invisible Victory is a great depiction of Sosuke's narrative arc in this season. The first time we see him, he strikes a heroic pose, ready to chase after Kaname as she descends into darkness. This is who Sosuke wants to be. Another shot portrays the reality as we see the battered and beaten child soldier he was, with Kalinin reflected in his expressionless eyes, looking on coldly. When we next see Kaname, she is portrayed against an almost celestial display. In the most telling shots of the opening, we see Sosuke reminisce over vivid memories of himself and Kaname at school together, that blissfully normal life they led. We are drawn deeper into his now empty eyes, deep set in a blood-splattered face, the shot drained of colour. His hand extends towards the sky as the sun rises, the red dripping away until he is pure white like Kaname. In the final shot, even as the whole world seems set to come between them, our pair move as one, with equal purpose. They disappear in a flurry of the same white feathers. Fullmetal Panic's religious subtext only remains as that for so long. It is a story that repeatedly tells us to grapple with our own fate, and that we are entirely alone in doing so. When we see the church go up in flames, it isn't just a rejection of God's existence, but of our attempts to become like him. Humans have sin in their very bones. The way Fullmetal Panic diverges from this age-old narrative is in its refusal to condemn a single one of its characters for this fact. Returning to the story, Leonard continues to imbue in Kaname a deep sense of guilt for the suffering she has indirectly caused, a means of curtailing her want to return to her old life. For a time she becomes deeply depressed, and yet in the scene at the pool, another favourite of mine, she frees herself finally from the dress Leonard forces her to wear, acknowledging his hold on her and finding it in herself to reject it, even for just a moment. On the night that Sosuke comes to try and retrieve her, Kaname finally confronts her captor. She calls him disgusting, objectifying, incapable of love, tells him she understands why his twin sister abandoned him, and asks whether his parents didn't love him properly. Leonard answers by simply affirming her belief, showing her a volley of memories, culminating in the trauma that shifted the course of his life, the night his parents died, but not before his mother tried to sacrifice him to save herself and Tessa. When he later presents her with an opportunity to simply shoot him and escape, she cannot bring herself to do it. Once again, he has wound his way into her mind, planting disorienting seeds of pity and empathy. She abandoned Sosuke for him, another man. What right does she have to go back now? Leonard, meanwhile, needs her love. Ultimately, what right does she have to refuse him? Maybe this is where she belongs. In this way, Fullmetal Panic masterfully portrays the mindset of a victim of psychological and sexual abuse. We understand deeply how Kaname feels trapped in this relationship, and how her Stockholm Syndrome develops. By presenting her with a clear opportunity to escape at the small cost of her morals and humanity, Leonard makes her believe it's entirely her choice to remain with him. In comparison, earlier on in the series, when Kaname asks Sosuke whether she can use one of his guns, he forbids it. You must not shoot. If he is corrupted on some base level, the least he can do is stop her from becoming so too. What he wants to protect is her right to a normal life, the one he was never given. In the last scenes of the first season of Fullmetal Panic, Sasuke and Kaname are side by side. In the last scene of the second raid, Kaname is that bit closer, just making contact. In one of the final scenes of Invisible Victory, Sasuke tosses aside his gun and they finally reach out to one another, a simultaneous acknowledgement and rejection of all that comes between them. When Kaname is torn apart from Sasuke yet again, it's too much. She tries to take back her agency the only way she has left. If her life is so important to Amalgam, she won't let them have it. Her final demand is to be allowed to say goodbye. Speaking to Sasuke for the first time in months, she asks him, how can she be free if it means others will get hurt? And yet when she tries to tell him to forget about her, her voice breaks. She can't do it. If there's something she wants, she has every right to fight her way to it no matter what. Everyone else who stands to lose something from it will just have to do the same. Finally, she has found what matters to her. She has found her resolve. This is where Invisible Victory ends, and yet it is only the prelude. In the final few novels, the series at last unveils its central question. If you could erase all the suffering you've been through, would you do it? Finally, we find out exactly what Leonard's faction of Amalgam are fighting for. The Soviet experiment gone wrong that created the Whispered also created something akin to a technological singularity, defined as a point in time at which technological growth becomes uncontrollable and irreversible, resulting in unforeseeable changes to human civilization. Specifically, the Whispered have become receptors to information from the future, causing weaponry to evolve at a rate that has sent the world spiralling towards nuclear disaster. Leonard's faction hopes similarly to use Kaname to send information to the past, ultimately to rewrite everything that has happened since her birth and return the world to its rightful state. The people who believed in Leonard's cause had a very strong motivation. They all had different reasons, but all of them had one thing in common. They hated their past vehemently, almost fanatically. They were able to do anything to fight against the past which they frantically rejected. That way of thinking could lead them into any battle, be it reasonable or not. Nami then symbolises the concept of fatalism. If the world had remained the way it should have been before the accident in Yamsak, she would never have died. Is it not their duty, then, to reverse such events? Leonard points out that Sasuke's ability to reason is muddied by his relationship with Kaname, one that could never exist in a world without war. Would allowing him to create a world wherein Kaname never faced threat from being a Whispered not be the right thing to do if he truly loved her? And yet, as we now know well, in Fullmetal Panic, love is not selfless. If Kaname is a symbol of hope and utopia, Sasuke is a symbol of all that is wrong. In Invisible Victory, we see Kalinin defect to Amalgam, and at the end of the very last novel, we find out his desire to erase this wrongful world, the world that killed his wife and unborn child, and the world that created Sasuke, to erase the world that tore them all apart. Kalinin had been the one who had saved Sasuke alone from a commercial plane crash whilst working for the Russian Special Forces, eventually handing him over to the KGB with the understanding that he would be reunited with living family or placed in an orphanage. Sasuke was instead trained as a child soldier, eventually coming under the care of Afghan guerrillas. By the time Sasuke and Kalinian meet again, the latter has become disillusioned with his country and asks Sasuke to leave it all behind with him and become his son, but it's too late. The gentle boy he'd known has become a hardened soldier who hardly understands this gesture of kindness. He resolves instead, then, to train him to survive in the world he has chosen. This is the cross Kalinian bears, the past he wants desperately to redo. Even so, Sasuke cannot bring himself to stab his father even at the end of it all. He is, as Kalinian says, the lamb raised by wolves who had no choice but to become one of them, the most pitiful existence. He tells Sasuke he wanted him to think about it one last time, that question that has plagued him for so long. Who is he? Mao pinpoints it in an earlier conversation. You shouldn't have ever had to hold a gun or learn to pilot that robot. We're here by choice and you're not. Mao's voice shook slightly and she paused. Look, I'd like to ask you something. Please, when this is over, stop it. Don't do it anymore. Forget about good-for-nothings like us. Just live for yourself. Don't ever take up a gun again. Be kind to people, laugh with them like a normal boy. In the decade Shoji Gato spent writing this story, it went from a fun mecha series to a full-blown masterpiece. Its ethical and philosophical conundrums are hefty enough, but the emotion it wields them with makes for a gut-wrenchingly human work. The entire thing is held together by its stunningly realised ensemble cast. Sasuke, Kaname and Tessa, sure, but also Leonard, Kurtz, Mao, Kyoko, Kalinian, Marjukas, Ben, Wraith, Gauden, Nami, Demon, Sabina, Mira, I could go on. Back in that scene in the church, we see a painting hanging over Sasuke's bed. Pour Gouguons, d'où venons-nous, que sommes-nous, où allons-nous? The title should sound familiar if I say it in English. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? In Gogyon's words, to the right at the lower end, a sleeping child and 3 crouching women. 2 figures dressed in purple confide their thoughts to one another. An enormous crouching figure, out of all proportion and intentionally so, raises its arms and stares in astonishment upon these 2, who dare to think of their destiny. A figure in the centre is picking fruit. 2 cats near a child. A white goat. An idol, its arms raised mysteriously in a sort of rhythm, seems to indicate the beyond. Then lastly, an old woman nearing death appears to accept everything, to resign herself to her thoughts. She completes the story. At her feet, a strange white bird holding a lizard in its claws represents the futility of words. So I have finished a philosophical work on a theme comparable to that of the Gospel. As the series barrels towards its conclusion, the characters cast aside their affiliations to clash on an individual level. Leonard claims Merida Island, once the West Pacific Fleet's base, to activate the machine that will reset the last 18 years. Tessa dismisses all but the necessary crew and goes to face her brother, disbanding her fleet once and for all. On either side of her stand Marjukas, honouring his friendship with her late father to the last, and Sasuke, determined to save Kaname. Mao and Ben head to Afghanistan in a last-ditch attempt to stop the eruption of a Third World War, Leonard's final opportunity to split their forces, both in number and values. In a quiet scene before the crew part for the final time, they each go over their personal effects. Ben receives a package, heavily implied to be a copy of Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, Miyazaki's most scathing condemnation of human destruction of the natural world and war. Ben laments having only seen the notoriously censored American release. He plans to watch the DVD when he returns, but is almost persuaded to bring it with him, captivated by a need to see it before it's too late. This heavy nihilism punctuates the last few volumes of the series, a reminder that there is no salvation for our characters or their world. They have played God for too long. Few show any conviction they're making the right choice, if there even is such a thing. They continue to fight simply in order to give meaning to their experiences, simultaneously seeking revenge and atonement. Leonard argues that in taking her crew along on her suicide mission, Tessa is forcing others to fight according to her subjective belief that Leonard is in the wrong. Her actions are the ones that will lead to tangible suffering, and they do. And yet, to be a commander is to be willing to sacrifice others for your goal. That is what you must do if you want to honour the trust placed in you. For 12 novels, Tessa has fought to forge the conviction needed for this day. Even so, there's a wonderfully self-deprecating quality to Fullmetal Panic. It never fails to acknowledge the absurdity of its world. That is, after all, the whole point. Tessa wonders what to say as she goes to address her fleet for the final time. She shakes off her nerves, reminds herself of who she is, and faces them with her head held high, then trips on the podium. Later, Mao likewise gives her group a rallying cry in Afghanistan. You know what the worst thing about all this is? That they've left saving the world to us, of all people. Leonard himself has no interest in playing the villain. His self-awareness is rare in such characters. He easily and honestly acknowledges his motivations. He had a life lacking in love, and he wants to erase it all. One of the series' most brutal moments comes when Tessa tells him she knows exactly what their mother did to him, and that it doesn't change a thing. She has no sympathy. In this moment, all of Leonard's bravado fades away to reveal what he really is. A broken teenage boy, harshly rejected by his entire family. The line separating protagonist and antagonist drastically thins. It's shockingly easy to imagine a whole series told from his perspective, where he is the hero and our beloved leads the enemies. When Tessa stands finally over her twin brother's dead body, she feels a strange mixture of melancholy and apathy. The extent to which Fullmetal Panic rejects the notion of blood bonds is astounding, almost cathartic. Yes, he was all she had left, but she loathed him. Like this, the characters fight their way through the series' climactic chapters, running on an almost blinding hatred for one another and all that they stand for. It is little more at this point than a battle of egos. Fullmetal Panic is a series that faces the struggle of being human straight on. It's about clearing a path for yourself in a collapsing world. It doesn't present us with any easy solutions or characters we can idolize. In a medium that prides itself on its escapism, Fullmetal Panic is blisteringly honest. It's eye-watering violence and suffocating despair devoid of spectacle. And yet, in its utterly unflinching depiction of the reality of war and how it breaks people, beauty can be found in the strangest places. Above all, its characters' absolute dedication to moving forwards. Far from the trite adages fiction can often sell us, it doesn't try to promise us that we will heal, or that the suffering will end. Anime loves nothing more than stories of human connection seeing us through. And at times, in these last volumes, Fullmetal Panic can even seem to spit in the face of this notion. Encouragement comes simply in its characters' almost revelatory agency. It is for this reason that its at first unassuming ending, seemingly a classic happily ever after, carries such weight. For the latter part of the series, Kaname's consciousness has been taken over by Sophia. Sophia was an 18-year-old girl when her father sacrificed her in the failed Yamsak experiment. She is the Whisperer. When Kaname finally regains control of her mind and the prospect of using her to reset the timeline begins to spiral out of reach, Sophia shows her scenes of Sosuke's supposed death, followed by a world where this never happened and the two still meet. In this world, Kaname's mother never dies of cancer. Her strained relationship with her father is thus mended, and her family are happy together. There is but one critical flaw. Sosuke's cheek is missing its characteristic scar, a mark from any one of the 1,000 conflicts that have defined his life. She can't do it. She doesn't want a cheap imitation. It's him or nothing. This boy forged in the fires of war, the imperfect human she chose to love. The last few chapters of Fullmetal Panic are absolute chaos and wrought emotions out of me no series has before or since, along with a metric ton of tears. Mao and Ben nearly die in Afghanistan only for Kurtz, already believed to be dead for some time, to come to their aid at the last moment. Mao is seconds late in stopping Sabina from sending a single nuclear warhead to Merida Island. Kalinian shoots Leonard and attempts to escape with Kaname, knowing that so long as he has her, he might still be able to execute the plan. Sosuke manages to retrieve her and the two face off, but not before Tessa and the rest of the crew are forced to evacuate the island without him within minutes of impact. With Kaname safe and Kalinian dead, Sosuke returns to Al and waits. Days or weeks later in Tokyo, Kaname looks at her school uniform in disbelief. She really made it back. She knows at some point everything will hit her and she will be overwhelmed with grief. But for now, she gains strength from knowing she chose this world, and that he would have too. Somehow, in spite of it all, life continues, as it always does. When Kyoko embraces her for the first time in a year, she smiles through her tears. This could never be a mistake, right, Sophia? So when it turns out Sosuke did survive, it's not before showing us Kaname's happy ending does not depend on him. Here, Fullmetal Panic makes its declaration to the audience. It is pure luck, heartrending, beautiful luck, that Kaname does reunite with Sosuke. She is prepared to live on regardless. This is how Fullmetal Panic's characters find agency in a world that tries to break them. This is what makes Kaname and Sosuke's relationship the most powerful and beautiful portrayal of romance I've found in media. Luck is a theme in this final volume of the series. In Afghanistan, Ben survives by a hair's breadth. His opponent is, in fact, stronger. But that's not what determines who lives and dies in the utterly senseless and breathtakingly cruel wars these characters wage. In the inscription Tessa chooses for her brother's grave, she acknowledges his hope and desire. He who wished for a just world rests here. The series' penultimate chapter holds its greatest contradiction. Hearing Sosuke's cries, his desperate want to live, Al acts on his own will to protect his operator. In this action, we see the beauty that can only exist in what Leonard would have called a broken reality. Until the very end, Sosuke battles with the question, is he a mercenary, or simply a boy? Where does he belong? It is in not knowing the answer that he finds it. When Al likewise asks him whether he is a machine or a human, Sosuke tells him to decide for himself. It's what we all do. While true there is little time for it, if you squint you'll notice but one subplot missing from Invisible Victory. The second raid leaves Tessa and Sosuke's relationship unresolved. This is because it is in Dancing Very Merry Christmas that Tessa finally asks Sosuke whether he loves Kaname more than her. He turns her down with blunt honesty. Tessa's story could in another series be a tragedy. She loses both her parents as a child, and then later her twin brother as they take drastically different paths in life. She lives isolated from others her age, and even if she loves the Tuatha De Danann and her crew with all her heart and soul, she's not all that different to Kaname in that she's someone who has lost her right to a normal life because of her abilities. She stands above others, distant. She lives with the weight of knowing she has sent so many to their deaths, and watches others she trusts turn their backs on her. She is the series' most godlike entity, and she suffers immensely for it. When Sosuke turns her down, she wonders, was it too much to ask for this one happiness? We watch her cry over it, pick herself up and carry on, even as her feelings never fade. Fullmetal Panic reminds us that to see her as a pitiful figure just because of her dashed romance would be a disservice to her. As a young woman constantly bombarded with stories that tell me there is no meaning to my life without romance, as someone who has experienced heartbreak, Fullmetal Panic's staunch refusal to allow its female leads to be defined by such things could not be more precious to me. Lastly, Fullmetal Panic never tells us what to believe. It just tells us to have the courage to believe in something. One of the most poignant lines in the series is also one of its simplest. It comes after Sosuke wakes up from a 2-month coma to find himself in the abandoned church, when Lemon talks to him about Nami's death. One day we'll both pay the price. Still, they forge ahead. What else can they do? Yet to keep going forwards for another minute, even another second, that in itself has meaning. On his deathbed, Kalinian echoes the words Sosuke's mother had left him with in broken Japanese. Ikinasai. Go live. To quote the light novels one last time, victories, defeats, lives saved and lives lost. It seemed already impossible to him to unravel the countless number of intertwined incidents and write something about each. There was only one message he could leave to all the living who would continue playing with fate. Good luck. To me, Fullmetal Panic says, if we can find something worth fighting for, no matter what we might lose, maybe that can be our salvation.